Okay, who does not believe that things need to come out no matter how dark, no matter how diabolical they are, they need to come out so you can progress? Do you not believe that? Or are you the type of person who thinks that you could just bury things and cover it up and cover it up and then hope things get better? I'll be back. Hello, everyone. Let's jump into this. I discovered this article maybe a year ago. It's a Reuters article exposing politicians, elite politicians, that's what they say, who are direct descendants of enslavers. You know, by some of the, I cannot remember what video I said this in, but I was talking about how they keep saying we're not like our ancestors. And I would say, wait a minute, some of the things you guys do in current time and modern times is indicative to what your ancestors have done in the past. And if you're nothing like your ancestors, we would not be seeing residue. We would not be seeing similarities between you and your ancestors. I'm talking in regards to the mind of an enslaver. So an enslaver today would most likely be one of the most racist bastards in the world. So your actions, a lot of your actions and the things you guys say when you don't think before you speak, is similar to how your ancestors who were enslavers felt and thought. God said in his word, he not only blesses you to be rich, he blesses you to enjoy it. So if you don't acknowledge God and you have nothing to do with him, I guarantee you have a lot of problems in your life. But anyway, all we had to do is be patient, Black Americans. All we had to do is be patient. Know that our God has not forsaken us and watch all this truth that is coming out. Look at the truth that's coming out. Nobody else could do it. It's always a time and a place. So now we have a clear understanding as to why the things that we have fought for, the things that we have spoken out for, the things that we have demanded have always dragged out or just become stagnant. Let me get into this article, folks. Check it out. Many lawmakers need look no further than their own family history to find a much more personal connection to slavery in America, a brutal system of oppression that resulted in the deadliest conflict in U.S. history. In researching the genealogies of Americans' political elite, a Reuters examination found that a fifth of the nation's congressmen, living presidents, Supreme Court justices, and governors are direct descendants of ancestors who enslaved Black people. Now, you're going to sit here and believe that their past and their history or their family's history do not interfere with their judgments? I'm not saying all of them, but some of them. Okay, let's go on. Among 536 members of the last sitting Congress, Reuters determined at least 100 descend from slaveholders. Of that group, more than a quarter of the Senate, 28 members, can trace their families to at least one slaveholder. Those lawmakers from the 117th session of Congress are Democrats and Republicans alike. They include some of the most influential politicians in America. Republican Senators Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, James Lankford, and Democrats Elizabeth Warren, Tammy Duckworth, Janine Shaheen, and Maggie Hassan. In addition, President Joe Biden and every living former U.S. president except Donald Trump are direct descendants of slaveholders. Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and through his white mother's side, Barack Obama. Trump's ancestors came to America after slavery was abolished. 2 of the 9 sitting U.S. Supreme Court justices, Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch, also have direct ancestors who enslaved people. People, when you guys realize that curses are real and things travel through your bloodline, you will not be sitting there dumbstruck when people tell you someone is racist. Alcoholism can travel through the bloodline. Abuse. People who are abusers, that can travel through the bloodline. People who are thieves, liars, adulterers, it can go through the bloodline. So you're not going to sit here and tell me that enslavers, that mentality, that diabolical, supremacist, evil mentality did not go through these people's bloodlines. Let's go on. And in 2022, the governors of 11 of the 50 U.S. states were descendants of slaveholders, Reuters found. They include 8 chief executives in the 11 states that formed the Confederate States of America, which seceded and waged war to preserve slavery. And like I said, Civil War, that was an act of treason. And I think it was Andrew Jackson. He pardoned those people. He pardoned the Confederate soldiers. Here's the thing. We are constantly told that slavery was a long time ago. We get told, get over it. Or that has nothing to do with people living today. Yes, it does. But let me ask you something. What if I told you that the people writing the laws right now, the people deciding whether or not we get reparations, whether or not our voting rights are protected, are the direct descendants of the very people who own our people? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Why are these people and politicians who were descendants of enslavers? I know some people be like, well, that's ludicrous. Is it? You know that when you're a police officer and they find out that you have a criminal or ex-con in your family, that can kind of interfere with you getting a job. I know this for a fact because I know someone that was in law enforcement. So why doesn't this affect politicians? What, because it was hundreds of years ago? If you looked at what these politicians who are descendants of enslavers, if you looked at what they voted against and supported, will it be indicative of their past or family's history? Would it show that these people have the mindset of their ancestors? That's what we need to do. We need to look at these people voting history. We need to look at what they supported and what they have rejected. And it'll give us a clear picture. Do you have a mindset of your ancestors, or are you a fair person? Let's go on. A massive investigation found that more than 100 U.S. leaders, presidents, governors, members of Congress have ancestors who enslaved black people. And when you look at how they vote, it starts to look less like a coincidence and more like a family tradition. Today, we are going to look at the bloodlines of American power and ask, is the past really past, or is it just sitting in the Senate? You can't keep telling us to get over it, yet you are the direct descendant of an enslaver, and you have the inheritance of what they stole. See the hypocrisy, Black America? See how they all come together? All these different nations come against us. You know why? Because we're covered. They know who we are. They know who we are. That's why they're befuddled. That's why they're baffled. That's why they're envious. That's why they're jealous. No matter how horrible it looked, no matter how terrible it looked for us, they know we're covered by God. They know it. And one day they're going to show you how terrified they are because you came for God's. Let's go on. As I say, we're going to uncover the hidden history and stolen identity that this system tries to sweep under the rug. We're going to talk about a Reuters investigation that exposed the lineage of America's political elite. And listen, this isn't just about blaming people for what their great-great-granddaddy did. This is about people who are descendants of enslavers, governance. This is about people who are making decisions for or against our lives, and they have a dark history, a dark family history. And we want to know, do these people have the same mentality that their descendants had? That's what we need to know. Just like with these melanated immigrants who are all of a sudden so interested in our American politics, we need to see your motivation, your true motivation. Because it seems to me, the things that you have spoken out against and the things you support, you are directly against us. And that should be a conflict of interest. If you are a melanated immigrant and you're coming in this country and you're supporting everything that has to do with immigration and you're against everything that has to do with American citizens, specifically Black Americans, that's a conflict of interest and it should not be tolerated anymore. And people got to be sued. I don't care if you're in politics. If you need to be sued and made to go bankrupt, those are the seeds you planted. Let's go on. We are going to look at specific figures like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and yes, even President Joe Biden. We're going to look at their ancestors and then check this out. We are going to look at their voting records, because when you see the connection between generational wealth built on our backs and modern policies that keep us down, how do we go from the plantation to the policies? Let's jump into this. A little while ago, Reuters did a deep dive. They looked into the genealogies of Americans' political elite, and what did they find? They found that a fifth of the nation's lawmakers are descendants of enslavers. We're talking about at least 100 members of the last Congress. Republicans, Democrats is on both sides, but here's the thing. It's not just that they have these ancestors. It's that these ancestors built generational wealth and status that propelled these modern politicians into positions of power. You know, they tell us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but these folks inherited the boot factory. The list includes the aforementioned Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and some others I named. Now, some of these people will say, well, you can't choose your family. And sure, I get that. But you can choose your politics. You can choose how you address the legacy that put you in that comfortable Senate seat. But when we look at the voting records, when we look at where they stand on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, when we look at where they stand on H.R. 40, it starts to feel like they are protecting the family business. It's a preservation of the hierarchy. It's not just history, it's an inheritance of power. And they are using that power to ensure that the status quo remains exactly where it is. And do you know that back in the day when slavery was in full swing, those rich families pulled a lot of strings and dished out a lot of dough to get their family in politics? You think it's still not happening today? Put their family in politics, made their family judges, made their family law enforcement agents, at the time, slave patrols. They did it, or they got the poor white people, but they put their people in positions to do with their bidding. That's why Black Americans spoke about critical race theory. They're still doing it today. They're still pulling strings. They're still greasing hands. Okay, let's go on. Let's talk about Mitch McConnell. Now, this man is one of the most powerful people in the history of the Senate. Reuters found that his ancestors owned enslaved people in Alabama. 2 of his great-grandfathers were slave owners. In fact, the census records show that they held at least 14 human beings in bondage. In 2019, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stated his opposition to reparations for slavery, arguing that no one alive today is responsible for the actions taken 150 years ago. He stated that the U.S. has addressed the original sin of slavery through civil rights legislation and electing a black president, citing difficulty in determining who to compensate. First of all, as we have so eloquently pointed out many times or numerous times, Civil Rights Act rarely helps us. It has helped every other so-called marginalized group but us too. Barack Obama was not a black American. He was not a foundational black American. And for those of you who are still confused, foundational means we were in this land in the beginning. 2, how the hell you gonna have a difficult time knowing who to compensate? You know who the hell you put in chains. So stop playing stupid when you want to play stupid. Let's go on. Knowing that his family benefited directly from the labor of our ancestors, you would think maybe, just maybe, he would have some humility. You would think he'd say, you know what? We owe a debt, but no. He has the blood of his enslaver ancestors running through his veins. There's no compassion. He has no compassion. Let's go on. He has no sense of fairness or compassion. When asked about H.R. 40, that's the bill just to study reparations. How many times do you need to study it? Are you slow? Let's go on. Not even to cut the check, just to study it. What did he say? He argued that current generations shouldn't be held responsible. He said, we tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. Did you hear this? He thinks Civil War, which the South started to keep slavery, was the payment. He thinks the Civil Rights Act, which they only passed because we marched and bled for it, settles the tab. Talk about audacity. Here's a man whose family wealth comes from stolen labor, standing in the way of even investigating how to repair the damage. He is practically the gatekeeper of the status quo. He uses his power to block everything. He blocked the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. He blocks anything that looks like economic restitution. He is protecting the very system that created him. If he acknowledged that reparations were necessary, he would have to acknowledge his own position and life is partially the result of a crime. And they aren't going to do that. They get quiet and don't say anything, or they give these excuses. It's a refusal to pay the debt while still living in a house they bought from an inheritance left by their ancestors who were enslavers. Now, moving on, we have to be fair and look at the other side too. Let's talk about President Joe Biden. The investigation showed that his ancestors also enslaved people. One of his great-great-great-grandfathers enslaved a woman and a young man in Maryland. Biden presents himself differently than McConnell. He talks a good game about equity, but let me ask you something. What is his track record? Need I bring up the 1994 crime bill? We cannot forget that. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. Joe Biden didn't just vote for it. He wrote a lot of it. He sponsored it. The bill contributed to mass incarceration that decimated black families. It locked up a generation of men who looked just like the people his ancestors enslaved. You see the parallel? It's like one generation shackled us on a plantation, and a few generations later, the descendant writes a law that shackles us in the prison system. How do we even get here? How do we go from the plantation overseer to the warden of the state? Now, to be clear, as president, he has expressed support for studying reparations. He says the right things about H.R. 40, but has he put the full weight of the presidency behind it? Or did he? He didn't explicitly endorse direct payments. It's a lot of "we see you," but it's not a lot of "here's the check." It's that soft abstraction. It's not as loud as McConnell, but the result is often the same. We stay waiting. We get the symbolism, but we don't get the substance. They know what they're doing. They know the history better than we do sometimes. When people were in the streets screaming for justice, asking for basic accountability for police brutality, who stood in the way? The descendants of the very people who created the slave patrols that evolved into modern policing. Now, I wonder, people who are upset with what ICE did, do they see, the correlation between slave patrols and modern policing? Or are they still blind? Okay, let's go on. Tom Cotton, whose family owned people, has called slavery a necessary evil upon which the Union was built. He fights against the 1619 Project. He doesn't want our children to know the truth. Why? Because if you tell the truth about the origin, you have to question the legitimacy of the current leadership. They vote against voting rights. They vote against police reform. They vote against reparation. It is a one-track way of thinking. They are protecting their inheritance. And their inheritance is oppressing others. Here's the thing. This is a direct conflict of interest. I'm still waiting to see these FBA civil rights attorneys to get your head out of your ass. Stop running around trying to defend everybody's rights, but the rights of the descendants of your ancestors who were enslaved. Put that Ivy League law degree to real use. Let's go. Doesn't it seem like a continuation of the past? The deep past that was rooted in the so-called original sin of this country? Because if I really feel like if you guys believe there was original dark sin, you would do better. I told you, I feel like in public they put on this song and dance, this performance. Like we're so, oh my God, we're so disturbed and disgusted by our past. And in private, they celebrate it. I really do believe that. These political figures, they are walking monuments to the unfinished business of this country. They are the living proof that Civil War didn't end the power dynamic. It just changed the scenery. They went from the plantation house to the Senate floor. We need to understand who we are dealing with. When they tell you no on reparations, when they tell you no on voting rights, they are speaking with the voices of their ancestors. We need to speak with the power of ours to demand what is owed. I was saying to someone on a panel a month or so ago, I was telling them that prior to that time, when I thought about our ancestors, I had so much compassion in my heart that it could just bring tears to my eyes, just imagining what they went through. And I also said, and I've been saying this for years, that we Black Americans, aka FBA, Indigenous Black Americans, and those who don't want to believe we're not Indigenous, that's your problem. That's your problem. And maybe you're not Indigenous. Maybe you're part of the group that came here on boats, but everyone who was enslaved did not come here on boats. And I'm not going to keep saying the same thing. I just saw a video on TikTok where these two men, I believe they were white, European white or American white, saying specifically that this land is our land and we have been here for thousands of years. I just put up a short last year sometime with the president of Colombia saying the same thing. It's hard for you. Know why it's hard for you guys to process that? Those who keep objecting loudly wrongfully that we are not indigenous to this land, those called Black Americans, is because it terrifies you. It terrifies you. Even some FBAs are terrified, because those are the ones that never really stood up against the hypocrisy and racism in this country. So yeah, they're nervous. But the other ones who are terrified, because when the truth come out, they don't know what the F to do. What are they gonna do? Where they gonna go? When the truth come out and they can no longer deny it, where they gonna go? You're not gonna stay here. What's that saying? You don't have to go home, but you need to get the hell up out of here. Yeah, that's what's gonna happen. You don't have to go back to your original land, but you're gonna have to get the hell up out of here. Facts. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. When you have time, I know some of you guys got a lot of things to do in life, in real life. I do too. But when you guys have time, check out the other videos that I uploaded to this channel within the past. I think it was, it's about 3 years by now. I started uploading videos to this channel in January 23. So take the time out and check out these videos that your sister worked to put them up, because I enjoy what I do. That's why if I have videos that have less than 200 views, I just keep it moving. Because if it was about the views, I wouldn't do it. I really wouldn't. But thank you again for your time and attention. Thank you for sharing. Sharing is caring. And I will check you guys out in the next video. Deuces.